Hi, I'm Patricia Greenberg, and this is Eat Well, Live Well, Age Well. My guest today is Carla Malden. She's the author of Shine Until Tomorrow, a novel that tells the story of a girl obsessed with the future who must visit the past to learn to live in the present. I got that right off the book. Welcome, Carla. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Good,
Thanks for
good.
having me.
So there's so much to talk about, and I know you have other books. I want to weave that into the conversation at some point. But first off, I love this book so much, and it was handed to me through a friend who I think is a relative of yours. And we were out talking about, and they just said, "This is a great book. Why don't you read it?" And I loved it, and I couldn't wait to talk to you about it. Tell us the story and how you came up with time travel for the theme of Shine Until Tomorrow.
Well, that's an interesting question, and I've been thinking a lot about it because I don't personally consider the theme to be time travel.
Okay.
Oddly enough, very
Okay.
strangely, I am
Okay.
not a particularly I'm not particularly drawn to the genre of
Okay.
time travel.
Mm-hmm.
So I consider time travel to be the venue for a different theme.
Okay.
It just lent itself to the theme of exactly what you just said. This young girl who is driven, obsessed with the future, who has to make a trip to 1967 San Francisco, the summer of love, in order to really open her heart and learn to be present in the moment. So because of that particular moment in time, the summer of love, San Francisco, 1967, being such a time of optimism and idealism and the sense that the individual could actually change the world because of all those things. And even though it was a time of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, I think of it also as a time of innocence because it had this innocent optimism about changing the world. Because of all those features of that time, that's why it was the time that this character had to go to learn those lessons and open her heart. So that, yes, it is, of course, a time travel book. Whether or not she really time travels or like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, is it a bump on the head kind of thing? That's up to the reader.
Right.
But all that said,
Mhm.
that's the polar route to explaining how I really see time travel as the mode for a theme more about learning to live in the present.
Carla, I want to really speak to the idea of going back into the 60s and how, it's a much bigger conversation, of course, how it impacted the world then and the reverberation of how it impacts the world today. But I look at it like you go back to a time where the first thing we always say is we didn't have cell phones and communication was verbal and you had to find your way. And I loved that the character started out in the 2000s, went back to the 60s, and had to go back immediately and rely on her senses.
Correct. And that's another reason why I picked that time period for her to visit. Yes, she had to rely on her senses and her sense of self,
Right.
which in the present, actually it's 2007, in the 2000s is very skewed. She's a girl who's very walled off. She's very bright. She is very dexterous verbally. She uses language as a weapon. And she also, her thing is photography. So she also has this camera that's always around her neck that allows her to be an observer and keep her distanced from the people around her. And in the end, that's kind of the thing that helps her to bridge that distance to other people.
And, you want everybody, reading as a reader yourself, and when you're writing and other people are reading your work, you want them to walk away with something, whether it's a lesson or an insight, or maybe jar them into thinking about a different way to approach their lives. And I think that this had this quality that the social media and all we're obsessed with the electronic age that we're in now. And at that time, I can remember being a little kid and, going out on the front lawn, and I thought the lawn was enormous. And I go back and visit my childhood home, and it's a little grass patch, in the front. Like we were, like you say, skewed. We were so not. You just used your imagination and the world in front of you. And I thought it really brought a lot out in her.
Well, thank you. And that's why I set the quote unquote present actually in 2007 instead of right now, because 2007 right the week that this takes place in was the launch of the smartphone. And I thought I was really almost too much to deal with, that it would be a kid from right now, so steeped in so much technology and social media that I was afraid that learning to withdraw from all of those things would overwhelm the story.
Right.
So I said it at that moment. And also because chronologically, I wanted her parents to be a certain age. I mean, there were other logistical reasons why it had to be that, but it was fortuitous and then really worked that it was just at the launch of the smartphone. Because as I said, if it were a kid today, they would just be apoplectic, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it speaks to me because I was alive in those times, and I was born in 1960. But I also want to tell you that I think, I didn't read the book as young adults, but I think young adults today could get a lot out of this book.
Well, I love to hear you
I don't
say
think
that.
it's just my age group is loving going back to the 60s and, the idealization of it and all that. But a kid today, I think, could really benefit from getting in bed or on the couch, laying down and reading the story.
Well, thank you. And it's interesting you say that, Patricia, because I actually wrote it as a YA book.
Oh, okay.
Thinking I'm writing a book for teenagers because the protagonist is a teenager. And then it has been so gratifying to discover that adults really of all ages, but particularly who sort of have some firsthand knowledge of that time, are really, really enjoying it. So it crossed over in a way I had not particularly anticipated, but which is just thrilling.
It's amazing. And there is an explosion of interest and nostalgia, especially surrounding the 60s and 70s right now.
Well, the music certainly,
and the music for sure,
has never left us, as far as I'm concerned. It's never left my house.
Exactly. And as we get older, we want to go back to a simpler time, and a time that we all felt safe, because I think the world is feeling unsafe to a lot of people. And that was a time that you could hitchhike and you could go to a concert by yourself. You could go somewhere and there was always somebody looking out for you. It was a very different.
And you trusted people.
Yes. And you trusted people.
And that's part of what she learns. That is a big chunk of her emotional growth, is learning to trust people.
Carla, it's very difficult as a writer to capture a time period where you weren't a fully formed adult. Okay, so you're not looking back, you're trying to live it, but how did you get into that? Or where did you turn to for your research to be 16 in 1967?
Well, it's a time
14,
period.
15, 16, that age group, right?
Right. It's a time period that's always fascinated me. So I've always read a lot about it, watched, those are some of my favorite movies that were made in that time period. I think The Graduate might be my all-time number one movie. So I feel that I just sort of have naturally been steeped in that time period. But then in terms of doing actual research, I did some reading of accounts of people who were there in the Summer of Love in San Francisco, but I also got a lot of like sort of beautiful coffee table picture books, because I really just wanted to see the visuals. And then for me, what's really fun for me, it's just the picnic part, is getting to describe those visuals in words. That's fun for me.
Right.
So there's a whole scene that takes place at the Be-In in Golden Gate Park. That took place on this date in June 1967, and that just seeing pictures of it and then being able to describe it in words was just delightful.
And do you feel that when people are there, they're stuck in it, or they're stuck in, like I always joke, I'm stuck in the 70s, I went to high school in the 70s, the music and so forth. There are a lot of people that reject that say, hey, it's 2022 now, just forget about all that. What do you think what do you think that's about, where people don't want to hear about that and don't want to embrace that time period?
Well, that's interesting. I think having a little piece of the 60s in your soul is not a bad thing at this point in history. Right. Because everything else is so overwhelmingly frightening and negative and really counter to all of the things that we thought were going to come to pass in the 60s. Everything people thought about how the world was going to be in 2022 50 years ago is the opposite, as far as I can tell.
Exactly.
So I
Exactly.
think having a little piece of that really helps to, I mean, to be completely cliche, to, you know, one candle in the darkness kind of thing, which is really what the lead character Mari learns, is that she has that light, that 60s light, for lack
Right.
of a better expression,
Right.
within
Right.
her. And
Right.
we see her bring it into her present and her future. And I think if a few more of us could tap into that now, it would not be a bad thing.
See, I'm on board with you. And I think what's very unfortunate right now, it's going on with older people. Um, you know, you could say seniors, but I really 50 and up are feeling left behind by the explosion of the social media and the way that people are communicating. And people are afraid that they're going to be left behind, and they're not. I really would like to start a movement. We'll go back to storytelling and communicating, and you come and meet me on my front porch for a cup of coffee, and we go for a walk together. And I don't sit and text you all day, that we actually go out and go to a park and have a picnic. I mean, these
Right.
are all the things that I want to be brought back, but it seems like that gets poo-pooed. Oh, you know, you should be texting, and you should be online, and you should be on social media, and you don't have enough followers, and you know, you're present. You're trying to sell a book or a product, and your presence isn't strong enough. Like, I want to turn that back somehow, you know, bring that back.
I would love
Yeah,
that. To be completely honest, I'm not sure how realistic it is
it's
in
not.
terms of, you know, I'm not sure, but I think what maybe something we can strive for and actually achieve is some sort of happy medium. I think, you know, getting left behind by technology, I get that. I am not technologically inclined myself, but I think more importantly, if we could do something to counteract the emotional tenor of the country right now. The technology feeds into it because you just see your own opinion reinforced on social media all the time because of the algorithms and all that. But I think if we could get back to just a degree of civility, I would take that at this point.
Oh, absolutely. Carla, what was your message in the title, Shine Until Tomorrow?
Well, it's, as you may or may not know, it's a line from the Beatles song, Let It Be.
Yes.
And when the night is cloudy, there is still a light that shines on me. Shine until tomorrow, let it be. So again, talking about that quality of light, that's sort of a motif that runs through the book of light and darkness, apropos of her being a photographer and light and shadow and all of that. So that she finds this 60s light within her and brings it forward with her. And I think that I wanted it to be also an homage to the Beatles because I'm a crazy Beatle person. And to me, they represent the best of the 60s. So why not have a little nod there as well?
I want to bring up that Paul McCartney's turning 80, or just turned 80. I think he just had his 80th birthday. And there's a lot of celebrations going on. And it's very, very important, I think, not to lose that history, to keep telling these stories, Carla, and to keep setting books and movies, films, documentaries in that time period. You know, that generation of men and women who were teenagers in the 60s are now in their 70s.
Well, I'll tell you just a funny little brief aside is that when my daughter was growing up, we used to listen to Breakfast with the Beatles every Sunday morning.
Right.
That was a show then. Now they have, of course, the Beatles channel on satellite radio. But at that time, it was Breakfast with the Beatles on Sunday mornings. And I would say to her, you know, we're not religious people. We don't go to church. We don't do anything. Our thing is we listen to Breakfast with the Beatles on Sunday morning. And job well done me, because she named her son Lennon.
Oh,
so
how funny. Oh, wow. Oh, that's very funny.
Yeah.
Wowie zowie. Yeah. So you have a Beatles grandchild. There you go.
He goes by Lenny, but his name is Lennon. Yeah.
I'm Patricia Greenberg. You're listening to Eat Well, Live Well, Age Well. And my guest today is Carla Malden. She's the author of Shine Until Tomorrow. She's also a producer and screenwriter, and there's always so much to squeeze in. I quote from the blurb on the book: "It's a fun and touching novel about the people who raise us, the times that define us, and the stumbling blocks on our way to being a grown-up." Let me tell you a little more about Carla. We're going to discuss, along with her father, Academy Award-winning Carl Malden, she co-authored the critically acclaimed memoir, When Do I Start? So what was that like to work with your father? You had a very different vantage point than and perception that those of us have in the public. Yeah.
Well, I did my whole life.
Yes.
He was completely not a Hollywood person. Another brief anecdote you can do with what you will, just because it sums him up so beautifully. When I was a little girl, I went to sort of a posh all-girls school here in LA. And I think I was 8 or 9 years old. I came out one day, end of school day, and the French teacher said to me, Carla, your gardener is over there waiting to pick you up. There'd be a line of
Right.
parents and chauffeurs at this place even. And I looked over, not the gardener, my father.
Right.
So need I say more, probably having just come from the hill behind our house weeding or whatever.
Right.
Anyway, so that was very much my father. But in terms of writing the book, writing that book with him was really one of the great joys of my life, and will be no matter what else I do in my life. It took us about 2 to 3 years. I'd go over to his house every, maybe 3 or 4 mornings a week. And I'd sit with the laptop and we would just talk, and I would ask him questions, and then I'd come home and I'd write it up, and I'd go back the next day and ask deeper, further questions about the same topic and move on. So it was always sort of half a step back and 2 steps forward. And we laughed and we cried, and it was an extraordinary experience that I recommend for anybody, regardless of what their parent does for a living.
Did you learn a lot about the 40s and 50s and 60s through that process?
Well, I learned a lot about him and his
Mhm.
and things about his life that I hadn't known. I mean, I had always known the sort of stories that I had heard, and I knew the, incredible arc of his life, because he came from less than nothing.
Oh,
His
wow. Okay.
parents were immigrants, Serbian. He didn't speak English, even though he was born in this country in sort of a Serbian ghetto in Gary, Indiana. He didn't speak English till he went to kindergarten, because it was such an enclave.
Right.
So
Right.
he always sort of felt like he was playing catch up his whole life in terms of education. So he had an amazing American dream life story. So putting that aside, I think what I really learned was more personal stuff than about the real eras. I learned a little more about the McCarthy era, which had always interested me, so I knew that stuff. But I really learned about more his relationship with his father, his sort of lifelong hope to make his father proud of him, which is no different whether you're an actor,
Whatever you do,
or a
yes,
plumber,
absolutely.
or whatever.
Absolutely. Mhm.
So I'd say most of what I learned was really more personal.
Mhm. And I think, again, it just enhances your life to know more about a person, about a parent, about the world, about time frames in history. It opens you up to so many things. And I wish, again, you could sit at someone's knee and learn about them, as opposed to looking them up on Wikipedia, right?
Right. And I got to do that.
Yes,
It was-
exactly.
It was
Priceless,
fabulous.
priceless
Priceless.
experience. Carla, your second book, After Image, a brokenhearted memoir of a charmed life, was an account of battling the before and surviving the after of losing your husband. And you lost your husband to cancer.
Correct.
So the very personal nature of losing a spouse at a young age, it had to be excruciating for you. What drove you to share this journey with the world?
I really did not anticipate sharing it when I first started working on the project. While he was sick almost exactly a year, 11 months and change. That's from diagnosis to dying.
And how old were you at the time?
I was 52.
Mm-hmm.
And I started keeping notes, as one does, just to make sure I had everything medical down properly, and then that sort of grew and mushroomed into more of a journal, for lack of a better word. And then after he died, I revisited that and just started writing some more just to get it down. I mean, that's kind of what I do, is to make sense of something, I try to put it into words. That's my thing. So I just did it kind of naturally, without any expectation of it becoming a book. And then at a certain point, well into it, I thought, I think this might be a book. And then I started to kind of shape it more and sculpt it, instead of it being more free form. And then when I went back into it and read it, when I thought I had finished it, I realized that I really wanted him to be more of a presence, a vibrant, living presence in the book than a dying and then dead person. Right. So I punctuated the book with what I called snapshots, which are just little moments in his life that I thought captured who he was. And they're not the big moments. They weren't our wedding. They weren't graduations. They were little tiny everyday moments that just spoke to who he was. And so that then gave it a little additional structure.
I want to ask you, you knew he was terminal?
Not really.
Because I was going to say, was the death sudden or unexpected, or it's kind of expected when someone's sick, but not really?
It's a really difficult question for me to answer because I was very much in denial, but by the same token, from the minute I heard that he was as sick as he was, I thought inevitably that's going to have to be the outcome. So I was very split on that moment to moment to moment. You know, it was a lot of being a cheerleader. We can do this. You're going to do this. We thought, in fact, he had done it. He went through the chemo. He had the surgery, went through the chemo. We thought we were sort of done.
Right.
And then it recurred almost instantly.
Okay.
And then he just lived like 3 more months.
Okay.
So I'm sorry to hem and haw. It's a really challenging question to answer because there sort of is no answer. I don't know what I really thought. To this day, I don't know what I thought.
And how did your daughter handle that?
Well, they're just the 3 of us. She's an only child, and we all 3 were extremely close, are extremely close. She was extremely close to her father. She fell apart. We fell apart together. I feel like she saved my life. And if it hadn't been for her, I would have had no reason to get up in the morning. I hope maybe I did the same for her. We just pulled each other through. What you hope for going through something like that is that when one person is sinking, the other one is having a slightly better day, and you just kind of do that roller coaster together. And she was she had just started her 2nd year of college, and she dropped out for the rest of the year.
Okay.
And we went to Europe. We just cried together.
Yeah.
And then she went back the following September and has done remarkably well.
Yeah. Good for her. Yeah. It's wonderful to hear. So, part of what we do here at Eat Well, Live Well, Age Well is, we try to encourage people not to let their age get in the way of their dreams. And, you kept going, and it's amazing. And I always say, we're not old and we're not young. We've lived enough life to know that there's a future. All the scary things that are going on in the world, because my daughter's going to be 21, and she gets anxious and she gets scared. And I'm at a point in my life where, we got to the other side. You got to the other side. Your daughter got to the other side, right? So what do you say to people that have, whether it's a book in them or a screenplay, or they want a creative outlet, or like everybody has a story to tell, and storytelling is priceless. What are your words of encouragement to someone who's maybe gone through something and wants to put it on paper, wants to get it out there?
I would say just do it and enjoy the process. That's one of the nicer things about being a little bit older, is you can really enjoy the process without feeling so compelled to be goal oriented. As I said, when I was writing After Image, I wasn't really thinking, oh, this is going to be a book, and how am I going to promote it, and how am I going to get it published, and how am I going to go out? I just was enjoying the process of that book is kind of a double-edged sword. Right. But I just was, but with all my other books since, I just enjoy the process. I just love it. And which isn't to say it isn't torturous at times, the proverbial blank page.
Yes.
But just enjoy it. And then what becomes of it is the extra. So I say just do it, And
the
then
starting point
also,
is
and then you know if it's for you or not. If it's not for you, you'll find out soon enough.
Exactly. Or you could be like I hang out with a lot of writers, and a lot of times midstream, you're on a roll and then nothing comes, and you can just put it away and leave it there. I love what you said about that. It starts as a journal and putting down thoughts and ideas and observations, and then turn it into a book later. Like, don't even think of it as a
Absolutely.
book. Like, what is going on in your life that you want to write about, and how do you describe it and define it? Because if
You
you're
can always
sitting
go
there
back and
thinking,
shape it.
right, because having written cookbooks and self-help, they're very technical and they're very, okay, how many pages is it going to be? And the recipe has to be this long. And I have learned to stay away from all that too, and just be in the process. A lot of us have a hard time in this day and age to just be in process.
It's really challenging.
Without
Very challenging. I agree.
Carla, what do you have coming up next?
I'm reluctant to say finishing. I'm in the sort of home stretch of a new novel,
Okay.
Which is, it's about second marriages, which on the surface looks like it must be what they are now. The buzzword is autofiction.
Okay.
It's not. It's the data points of this character's life are similar to mine, but it's not me.
Okay.
It's not my life.
Okay.
So I'm just finishing that up. I hope. Apropos of talking about keeping notes, I have reams of notes that I now am going through to say, well, do I want to incorporate that or should I let that go?
Yeah.
But then it's 100,000 words of something at this point.
Yeah, there you go. And I wish you the best with it. I always like to ask my guests, what do you like about getting older?
I don't want to sidestep the question, but I don't really feel older at
Okay.
all. I feel like I'm 17 inside.
Mhm.
But if I were going to answer the question more on the nose, I would say, I think I am managing to let go of worrying about what people think quite so much.
Mhm.
I think that would probably be the big plus, and learning to be gentler with myself.
Right.
I look after my grandson most days when my daughter's working. So if it takes me an extra 6 months or a year to finish this book, that's the way it's going to
Right.
be.
So
And I
busy.
wouldn't trade that. I
Mhm.
get to, how
Mhm.
lucky am I to help raise my
Absolutely.
grandson?
Yeah. So there's like a level of content and relaxation that comes in as you get older, and you start to feel that things are going to happen when they're going to happen. And it's okay to
Exactly.
sit back and let it be, right? Let it be. Let
Yes.
it be. Yeah. Go. So Carla, in closing, I want to thank you so much for being here and sharing your story with us. And for more information about Carla and to buy her books, you can go to carlamalden.com, CarlaMalden.com. And I'm looking forward to future work, Carla, and please be in touch with me when it comes out. And thank you all as well for listening to Eat Well, Live Well, Age Well. Please subscribe to this channel here at Patricia Greenberg, the Fitness Gourmet, for more engaging discussions on all things aging well. Thank you, Carla.
Thank you so much.